Good morning. How you doing, DC?
Doing great, Martin. How are you today?
I'm doing great, man. It's the football season. Well, no, it's not over. It's just beginning. The real season has begun. But big news this past weekend. No one really surprised, I guess, as a whole. A lot of disappointment. But Tua not bringing home the Heisman Trophy. What are your thoughts on how things panned out for Tua and the others in the Heisman race?
Well, on the podcast this week, we're going to discuss that a little bit. We had a little technical difficulties yesterday and didn't get up. It'll be up later on today. But we're talking a little bit about that is Bama fatigue a real thing out there? And I think you see that in some of the things that's going on, SEC fatigue, Bama fatigue. But I really believe that Tua was the best quarterback, the best player in college football. I think that the Heisman Trophy voting has turned into something that it never was years ago. We've got areas voting for different players. You got old Heisman candidates voting for leaving people off ballots and that sort of thing. I don't think you get the true picture of the best player when you do that. It's more biased in voting, and so I don't take anything away from Kyler Murray. I think he's a great player. I think Dwayne Haskins is a great player, but I think that I really don't. I know our people are Alabama Nation is probably disappointed, but I think it's good for Tua, and I think he'll grow from it, learn from it. He'll bounce back from it, and I don't think it's going to affect him. If anything, it'll increase his play. I don't think it's going to hurt him, and nothing's going to get him down. In other words.
Yep, and that's DC Capstone Report talking about this Kyler Murray Heisman issue. James, did you have a question for DC?
I do. It's actually kind of a similar question I asked you, Martin, in our buy or sell segment. DC, when you talk about just college football now, back when the Heisman, to me, was in its glory, in its heyday, you only had basically a meaningless one bowl game after the Heisman Trophy was given out. And now you have, especially for your runner-up and your winner, possibly still two games with one of those players still to go, two important games. So my question to you is, should we just shift just all of these college football postseason awards, rather, until after the playoffs?
Well, I think in this day and time, that's where we should be heading. If you're going to count postseason games, you should count them all, not just the SEC championship game, Big 12 championship game, but if you're going to count, if it's just going to be an award for the total season when that last game ends, you should stop there. So I think if you're going to look at the full body of work, then you should go with all of the play, and that would be even in championship games. Most of the time you're going to have in the finalists people who are in the running are playing in the college football championship, because the Heisman candidate is usually going to be one that's led his team and done a good job, been a star on his team, but also led his team into the playoffs. So, I think that we should go and do it for the entire time. But if you're not, then don't do it for one game, not the rest of the game. Do the whole body of work. Either stop at the end of the season or go all the way through the playoffs.
Yeah, and speaking of changes, DC, and you can come in on this. At one point, the national championship used to be after the regular season. There was no SEC conference championships. There in the bowl game didn't matter. You got the championship. Well, they realized the bowl games were gaining in importance, so they changed the national championship. Another stat, and I always laugh at this because people always say, "Hey, Martin, is it true that you actually never lost any yards in your career at Alabama?" And I always laugh at that because technically I didn't, because they didn't count bowl games, but I actually got stopped for a safety in a bowl game. Now they're counting bowl stats, and so everything has shifted except for that. Comment on that part of it. But here's the other part, DC. What would you think if they actually voted for the finalists, and then after the finalists, sort of like you do in a political party, you know what I mean? Like you have your primaries, and then you vote for the finalists. That way you don't have situations, in my opinion, you come down to the top three vote getters move on. and then you vote on those three.
Yeah, I don't know about how that would work in the college football world, but I mean, it's definitely something that you could do.
Well, I mean, but think about this. I help you, and then maybe this will help you think through what I'm asking. For instance, the three guys that the only three guys got invited to New York. Why? Because it was clearly three leaders. Okay, you vote, and then between now and the end, even if you're not going to go into the bowl game, you now have a revote for just those three, and then you don't have the stupidity of 40 people leaving Tua off and 27 leaving Kyler Murray off, and even if you gave it out before the championship game.
Yeah, I think that would definitely work in that favor. I think a part of the problem, though, Martin, is what the Heisman Trophy is going to represent. It's more biased now than what it did before. And what you talked about in some of those championship games, here's the reason that was changed. It was changed because so many teams were voted a sporting news or an API or a UPI national champion, and then went and lost their bowl game against one of the teams that was undefeated too. And so you saw a lot of teams getting national championships and then losing their bowl games, and people wondering, were they really the best team?
Right.
So I think by not allowing the Heisman Trophy to be won on the field, and by that I mean all games to be considered, you take out the whole scenario of someone like Tua, or let's say Gaskins, if he had gotten into the college football playoff. If he'd led his team to victory and had several Heisman moments in those last two games, you've taken that ability away from him. So I think voting in the Heisman Trophy has gotten too biased. It's gotten too away from what it used to be. Martin, there were in the old days. Talk about the old days, but there were sports writers who took it so seriously that they made sure in days where you couldn't get around that they saw every player play they could play. That they made trips. They did everything to do to see the players when they took a serious voting, and now it's become more of a popularity contest.
Yeah, I totally agree. We'll move on from the Heisman conversation. I'm sure it's going to be brought back up as 1 and 2 will face each other in the Orange Bowl. Stealing one of AJ's questions from a little earlier, what impact do you see the result of that contest having on this Orange Bowl?
Well, I think it's a positive impact for Alabama. I think Alabama always plays better when they've got something to play for, whether it be real or perceived. And I think in this situation, everybody says Coach Saban has really something to coach them up on. Well, I don't think Coach Saban has an opportunity to remind them who they're playing against. They're playing against the best football player in the nation, according to the Heisman voters. So you just got to think about this. You judging from the tweets and judging from the ones who've been vocal about it, I'd hazard to say that every defensive player on that Alabama team has in their mind, hey, well, I'll show them. We're gonna show them, and I think individual effort in this game for defense is going to be ramped up a notch because they're going to go against someone they're going to be told not only by the national media and by their own coaches and by every newspaper clipping they can see all weeks leading up to the game is the best player in college football. And it just so happens to be, hey, your quarterback isn't that good because he didn't win.
That's right. We're speaking with DC Capstone Report. He's a weekly guest. You can find his podcast in its entirety at dccapstonereport.com, dccapstonereport.com. Coming back on the other side, we're going to flip over, kind of look back a little bit at this season. I may ask you one more question about the Orange Bowl, but we got a couple weeks to get to that. I want to kind of look back at this season, DC, kind of which coach may have been overlooked on this staff. What were maybe some disappointments in this year's season, even though Alabama was able to go 13-0? Did they leave some things on the table that can improve between now and the game against Oklahoma? That and more coming up right here on the Blitz on Tide 102.9 and 100.9. All right, let's get back to DC. DC, as we were going to break there, wanted to ask you disappointment. There's two glaring things that were disappointments for me they didn't cost us anything, but they both could loom large in the college football playoffs. But from your viewpoint, what was kind of a disappointing or an unexpected? It may not be disappointing, but didn't perform to the level you expected.
Well, I don't know if I call them disappointments. And when you have a 13-0 season, I think
Right.
that terminology, I'd call it opportunities for improvement. And
Yeah.
I think there's several opportunities for improvement. I think the biggest thing to me was how much we missed Burton Burns and his coordination of the running backs. I think we had some great running backs, and I think overall we had 4 running backs that could play anywhere, start anywhere in America. And I think the use of them during the season, I just think I think the coordination of the running backs and going with the one who has the hot hand, which Burton Burns really had a good inclination on to do. I think we missed that this year. I think our running game was a little down because of that, and so that's one of my opportunities for improvement.
Hold on right there, because that C.J. Watson also said, I don't know if I'd call it a disappointment, but I would like to see a more dominant run game throughout the course of the season. The one, and I say disappointment, and then of course that's probably the word, not the best word. It is, as you said, DC. What's the place that you expected to see an improvement with Tua as the quarterback? I expected this running game to be more dynamic because people just wouldn't be able to get in the box with Tua at quarterback. But I didn't see that this year. But speaking of that, going into this game, how big a role does that one area that you and I both have identified as an opportunity to improve, how big a role does it play potentially for Alabama?
Yeah, because I think if there's ever a team that we have an opportunity to really run on, and we're talking about Kansas gashed Oklahoma for one back, gashed them for over 200 yards. So I think this is an area that we really can take advantage of. So if we can improve our ability to run the ball in this Oklahoma game, I think it bodes really well for us for a victory, because that sets up the passing. If Oklahoma has to come up and stop the run, it opens up so much in the slants. The slants now that they don't cover very well, it gives it a wide open lane there to throw over the linebacker. The linebacker has to come up and cover the run. So, yeah, I think running the ball in this game is very important. And like I said, it's an opportunity for improvement. And I do think we missed Burton Burns more than people would give you, more than people thought at the beginning of the season.
I agree. I think Burton Burns he knew how to manage the game. Some guys know they don't know how to manage the game, when to sub, when to put the guy in, et cetera. So I do think we missed him.
And he had an uncanny ability not only to manage the game, but knowing which one of his backs had that game. It was their day. They couldn't do anything wrong. He knew who to give the ball to in certain situations. And, I just think we missed that this year.
I totally agree. Did you have anywhere else or any other area that you thought Alabama didn't have the type of season you expected?
Well, I mean, it has to do with the run game, but I think the offensive line run blocking. I think there was some, and I know it's part of the scheme. And when you run the RPOs, it's a different type of blocking. But I just felt like on our short yardage, there were times where I felt like we could have punched it in, just put man on man, and should have been able to muscle them in on that 5 to 10 yard range and score every time running the ball. And I think we got stuffed and we got stopped a couple of times on third downs because of that. And I believe extending the plays on third downs are important. If you track any stat, if you can extend the drives on third down, I think then that will give you an indication that you're going to win the ball game. So I believe being able to do that on short yardage was one of my other opportunities that we have to improve. And I think it has to do with the run game. It also has to do with the blocking scheme and being able to transition from the RPO blocking to the actual in-your-face, beat-your-man blocking. And I think we saw some of that. I think Deonte Brown, when he came in, he had that run blocking down. He may be a weak on pass blocking, but he had his run blocking down. That's the type of run blocking that I'm talking about.
Yeah, speaking of Deontay Brown, no one talks about the fact that when he was in against Georgia, our running game looked dominant. He went down, and we looked like we couldn't get a first down. We couldn't get any yards on first or second down, and then we were in long yardage situation. And I agree with you, DC. Anytime your percentage is probably equal or close on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 as it is on 3rd and 8 to 10, Tua probably had his higher completion or success rate on 3rd down conversion in 8 to 10 as we did on 3rd and 1. Then that's a challenge and an opportunity to get in better. Here's one area, and get your thoughts on this, DC, where Alabama has an opportunity, and this may be a disappointment. This it's hard to say this, like you said, when you're 13-0, but the inside linebacker play to me. Even though they've had their moments, that's an area that has to improve, I think, in this game, or Alabama could be in trouble in terms of our linebacker play. And the irony of it is, DC, running back play, running the ball, and linebacker play would be the two things that you would probably say Nick Saban has been the best at in his career at Alabama, and it's probably the worst two parts of the team, other than special teams. Yet he's 13-0.
Yeah, he's 13-0. We talk about being disappointment, but I think we had a partial part of that is, and I know, I'm high on Mac Wilson, Dylan Moses, love them both to death. I think Mac Wilson really stepped his game up.
Right.
But I'm gonna be honest with you, and I know a lot of folks out there said, "No, you're crazy, David." But I think the loss of Keith Holcomb this year really did a number on the depth at linebacker, and I think that he would have given you quality minutes to rest a couple of those guys, and they would have been their best at certain points. But I really believe those guys played almost 90% of the plays during the games this year, and I think that we'll look at next year as to develop. I don't think we really developed another linebacker. If you look at it, we always had a linebacker in the hole, is what I call it. Nobody knew who C.J. Mosley was, and all of a sudden he was flying around making plays. And then nobody knew who Reuben Foster was, and he was flying around making plays. And then Reggie Ragland sits on the bench and then comes in and starts making plays. And we just didn't have that person this year to step up. Dylan Moses and Mac Wilson had to carry the load for the most part all year long at the middle linebacker.
Oh, I definitely think the loss of Keith Holcomb hurt this play from several standpoints. His leadership, his maturity, his experience, as well as, David, the ability to rest guys and have them be playing at a high level the entire game. So without a doubt. But I guess I'll take this time to ask you, all the coaches came in. We really hadn't critiqued the coaches a lot, like as a whole, and we'll say that for the future because I think we can have that conversation during this break time. But is Pete Golden one of those guys that just is he a guy that you look at and go, he has to pick up his game as a coach, or is it just because they didn't have the depth, or is it part of it, the coaching?
Well, I was going to give him a pass this year because of the lack of depth in trying to develop players. I think he's not one of the ones that I would say jumped off the page at you. I think Craig Keglowski jumped off the page of what he's able to do with the defensive line, that front seven, being able to cross the line, make pressure the quarterback without having to blitz much. I think he did a great job. I think Jeff Banks, just unheralded as a job he did with our special teams and with our tight ends. And I know we give a knock on special teams a lot. We missed a lot of extra points, but if you go back and look at the stats, we were 75% on field goal. I think before the year ever started, you said, "Hey, guarantee before the year starts, we'll give you 75% of all your field goals." We just took it in a heartbeat based on our past field goals. So I think also with the coverage and the return game, Jeff Banks really impressed me. And Josh Gaddis with the wide receivers, I think he came in, and I would say he was probably the most outstanding coach this year. Came in and those receivers that are fast and had good hands, he gave them quickness. He gave them first step quickness. He gave them hand placement and foot placement. that has allowed them to beat defenders off the line, and I think that's made a great improvement in our passing game.
Well, DC, you, and this is not calling you out, but you did what everybody else has done. The one guy that no one has talked about this whole offseason, and that's a good thing, is Carl Scott. The guy came in. Yeah. I don't think any position coach ever has had the challenge that he has in terms of he replaced all of the starters from last year with the exception of Thompson, who only had started 2 games. And I told someone, I said, you kind of forget that he had the job he had to do just because of what they did. So I tell you what, we're going to give grades for the coaches. But if you want to comment on that, I'll let you comment.
Well, I'll just say, Carl Scott, you cannot say any better than the job he's done. But that, like you said, is a good thing because we forget that we had all those people that he was starting with all fresh new people back there because they played so well during the year and they grew into playing great. And he's a great coach and he'll do better things down the road. But yes. People don't talk about him because they don't recognize the job he did because it seems like he's got all seniors back there playing in the defensive backfield when he doesn't. So, yeah, you're exactly right.
All right. Hey, we got Pat has a recruiting question for you. Pat, you're on with DC.
Hey, good morning, fellas. I want to talk numbers a minute. Right now we have 24 on hand. We really, really need, y'all been talking about inside linebackers. We really need 2 inside linebackers or linebackers, period. We need 2 defensive linemen. We need possibly one more safety / cornerback. And we need at least one, because we missed out on Clay Webb. We need one more offensive lineman, and we need one running back. That brings that number to about 30, DC. What do you think?
Well, I think that's that's a pretty aggressive number there. I don't think that we would have that many scholarships. I think unless
that's my question for you.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to do that. But I do think this. I think you're going to see a couple more impressive flips. Here, I'll just give you a little tidbit. I think there's some impressive flips, and maybe in the running back area that we're going to make a big noise, big splash here soon. But I think that losing Webb was big because of the in-state best player 2 years in a row. That's tough. But I think Kirby Smart had an inroad there in recruiting for a long time. Had a great relationship with him and his family, so that's one reason there. But I think flipping the defensive back from Michigan, flipping the back from Texas A&M is just another theme that you'll see in the days ahead as we go into the recruiting season. And I don't think it's over by a long shot. I think Alabama still has the number 1 signing class coming in. This possibly could be the best signing class that Nick Saban's ever had.
All right. I got one more question.
You better make it quick.
To be an insider, yes. My question is, with Paul Tyson and I think there's 2 more that are going to come into class this week. Does that make any difference in the total numbers?
No, I don't think so. I think that's just another way of them being able to report early. They do that every year. We got some reporting early. The practice gives them extra practices to get them a little head start. Practice during the bowl season, during the playoff season. So I don't think it's going to hurt our numbers. We may possibly have a gray shirt or 2 that come out of this to help our number. But
yeah, there we go. A couple of gray shirts would help this situation out tremendously. All right,
thanks, Pat. Thanks for your patience, man. All right, DC, I wrap it up and toss it to you to tell people how they can follow you.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at DavidCott50. That's at DavidCott, DavidCott. You can check us out on the web, but we have a Facebook on the DC Capstone Report page. You can like us there. And also on the DCCapstoneReport.com. Like I said, we had a little technical difficulties yesterday, but we'll be getting the podcast up later today.
All right, that's DC Capstone Report. Joins us each and every Tuesday, courtesy of Freelance Pictures and RollTideBama.com. Check them out at DCCapstoneReport.com. Thanks, DC.
Thanks, Martin. Have a great day and roll tide.